Hi, it's Dustin Lanier. Thanks for listening. Please find me on LinkedIn for original public sector operations content every week. And please reach out to me if I and my team of procurement professionals at Civic Initiatives can help you be a public procurement change agent. I'm going to talk about what is a content strategy, why would you have one, what makes content valuable to people, then talk about different styles that I've done a lot of content in, and I'll talk about some of our experience. Examples from the field, I'll show you guys some examples of some of the stuff that we've done. Tools of the trade, I have an infographic that I'll make available, and then that'll also be the basis for the breakout that we would do next week if you guys want to go down into the deep grunge on like how you actually do it. I'm not assuming everyone wants to know all of this stuff, so you guys can self-select what you want to learn more about as we go. So what is a content strategy? It starts with what is the business strategies and objectives, and then how does the creation and distribution of content help to drive those business strategies? If you don't have an understanding of why you're doing it as you come in, it's easy to get lost or to lose steam. And really, consistency is as important as anything else. I've looked back at some videos I did in the late spring last year, and I'm like, oh, what an amateur I was. But each time you do it, you learn, and then we're just going forward. We're always forward. So some example business strategies, and I guess before that, I'll say, why did we make a commitment to do content? So I can tell you categorically, I resisted content for 9 years of running this company. I would see people do blog posts, and I'm like, I'm busy. I don't have time for that. This is not what I'm doing. And I had peer businesses of mine and friends of mine, they would do little white papers and stuff. I'm like, good luck with all that, because that's not how I make any business. Well, then COVID hits, and now you can't talk to people. My company only serves public procurement officers in their operation and transformation projects. That's only like 4,000 people in the country who can buy anything that I sell. So my entire environment went dark with COVID. So COVID was very painful in terms of the immediate crush that it put onto procurement officers, as you guys all well know. My first article was procurement officers on the front lines of COVID, and I did that April of last year. And in some ways, it was just sort of speaking to that audience that had gotten completely underwater, to where outside of the clients that I already had, all conversation had stopped. And I was reflecting what I was hearing people were going through and talking about it. And I had like 100 touches on that article, and I was like, well, that was pretty good. That was useful. And then I started doing a little bit more. And then I realized that for me, the only way I was going to survive COVID was I needed to not be needy of the time of people. So what I needed to do was create value for busy people. I'm going to create content and I'm going to push, and they can choose when they want to pull, as opposed to me just adding one more thing to their day. I wanted to either speak to them, I wanted to reflect them, I wanted to bring value to them. And it was part of the way that I was providing service through the way that I do work. And for people who didn't know me yet and who were suspicious because their inboxes were filled with PPE vendors and people trying to really just drown them in phone calls, it shows that I have depth and gravitas, that I know what I'm talking about. You can read some of my articles and so forth, and you know that I come from procurement. And so that was my strategy, was to be able to build that model and to establish a connection and the ability to have conversation with people over time. Your objectives may be different. Like if I was a chapter president, I would want to attract young people to the profession. I would want to make value for people who maybe not only have not met other people in chapters, but they haven't even met their own team in person. And I want to hold them, and I want to keep them in procurement. I want to keep them interested. So how do you create content that inspires a conversation or drives it? And so I'll talk about like what I think good content is. Your objectives also may be to build a discussion point with suppliers, because suppliers had a tough time through COVID too, obviously, right? And so, there may be different motivations, but what are your business strategies? And then how does content fit in? So I went from doing zero content, literally zero content before April of last year, to I'm doing content 3 times a week. And don't ask me how I'm accomplishing that, because if I sat and looked at it, I don't even know. I mean, I have some help, but generally I'm doing the content and running a company at the same time. But I think I've learned things that allow it to happen. So making content that's valuable. If you're going to put time into it, people need to like it. In my experience, there's like 5 things that are good questions to ask as you're building content in whatever form and medium that you do it in. One is, who are you writing for? because it may be different. You may have different audiences. So think of your avatar. Who do you want to read it and do it? And really think, how do I build something that resonates with them? What can they find in it? And I think it's some of these elements. Either it creates curiosity, right? It's something that's a little different. It teaches them something new, maybe come at it a different way, a different cut. Make people think differently about their situation. Really think about, well, I've assumed it's this, but maybe it could be more this. And then don't just write it to put it out. Try to find ways to encourage another conversation and another conversation. I use LinkedIn as my primary delivery platform because I find that LinkedIn became basically the only virtual business conference of 2020 to 2021. Now, of course, a lot of procurement people are not on LinkedIn, so I cross-post it into my website, but I use it there. If you just put out a piece of content and no one engages with it, then the algorithm drops it off. Think about how not just that you put forward a statement, but maybe a question or maybe a way to create a topic. Another thing that I found about 3 or 4 months in of doing content, because I was doing articles. Articles are very time consuming. I was doing others. I found there were other ways to create content so that you can get some other value on it to where it's quicker and it's more bite-sized. So one thing I started doing was I started interviewing a lot of people inside of public procurement. I happen to have a pretty decent follower base on LinkedIn. I went from 1,800 before COVID to almost 5,000 right now. So, I mean, I have one of the higher connection rates among public procurement people on LinkedIn. So I use it to share the platform. So I've interviewed 3 or 4 or 5 different state procurement officers, city, local. And so it shares new knowledge or new takes on things with people. I think people love interviews. I did one with Jen Myers, who won y'all's Young Person of the Year award, and that was very popular. I really enjoyed that conversation with her. And as you can tell, I'm very interested in the question about how young people will want to do procurement and how we make procurement be something that they want to do. This little green thing here, repackageable content is king. If I look back at some of the content that I did in early COVID time, I was doing long, complicated articles. Like I was doing 3 things you should know right now about reimbursement when you're thinking about FEMA procurement officers, or how to vet suppliers in a time of uncertainty. And some of it is still out there. And actually, I just had a call today where I pulled one up that I did 9 months ago. And I'm like, everything you're asking me is right here in this article. One thing I guess I learned as I went is, how can you get value out of every time that you touch content? Because it does take effort to do it. Gary Vee is, I don't know, almost a cliche at this point, but he has a thing about how to take one piece of content and use it 10 times. I started doing different stuff because I'm like, if I'm going to put this much effort into it, I need to get value. So instead of just putting out one long video, I'll take a long video and I'll clip out 90 seconds of it. And that's now a piece of content. I'll take it and I'll convert it to a podcast that makes that same use of content. I'll take a screenshot of my promotion of those things, and that's a piece of content. I'll do a behind the scenes of me taking the screenshot of me doing the thing, and that's a piece of content. As long as you are thinking about how your audience will receive it and what they will be interested in and enjoy, finding ways to use that content multiple times is so valuable, especially if you're in an environment like LinkedIn. Like you may be in newsletters and so forth, where people will always see your content, but don't assume they actually open your newsletters, because email is full of stuff. But in an algorithm situation like a Facebook or a LinkedIn, you can't assume that people saw the content, because the way LinkedIn works is it will take your content and it will test it with a certain number of people. And then based on the amount of engagement those people give it when they interact with it, it will decide whether it goes to a next level and a next level and a next level. I've had pieces of content that I've had 10,000 people see. I've had great content that I had only a few thousand see. And I know that one was better than the other, but it doesn't matter because the algorithm didn't serve it that way. So really thinking how you can take and modularize your content so that you can get maximum value out of it is strong. So content styles. Now, there's a lot of stuff on this page. I don't want you guys to vapor lock that if you don't do all of this, that you are failing with your content strategy. It's a pick list. So pick some things that you like and work. I will tell you, I have done all of these things in the last year in different shapes, and they all have places in a content strategy. Videos, people like videos. I've done tons of interviews. I've done individual panels where I post the long video, and then I definitely learned that taking the long video and doing clips of it and subtitling the clips is a very good way in a period where people are busy. especially if you use LinkedIn as a platform. I know there's a lot of chapters that have presence on LinkedIn. Maybe you have it on Facebook, wherever your platform is. Just imagine the person that you're trying to get to scrolling, and you need them to stop. So you have to design content that makes them stop. And if they don't, then it was almost as if you didn't do the content. So what's going to grab them? A long video with a long build in, or here's a picture of a bid that I just released at 0.02 font because it's this big. People are not going to stop. So how do you get people to engage? So videos are powerful. Short videos are super powerful. That leads into the top one. Audio, she mentioned Clubhouse. I'll talk about Clubhouse in a minute. So I do a weekly podcast now that is pretty straightforward somehow. I use Clubhouse. So Clubhouse is a drop-in audio app that I use it for a very specific purpose, which is when I'm going to gather a group in a situation where everyone is zoomed out and they just can't see each other anymore, but they want to have a conversation. And it's very effective for basically open line podcasts. Also, I'll take video and I'll extract the audio and I'll make it into its own different type of podcast. And then there's something called audiograms, which is basically almost the short videos, but it's taken the audio and it's representing a sound wave of it. And that's kind of cool. And I've used that 2 or 3 times, and it's just something different. Live video, of course, everybody knows Zoom. There's webinar packages. I would strongly recommend, if you're doing live events, that unless you are specifically wanting to have a wall between you and your panel, that you consider using the full Zoom as opposed to the webinar template, because the webinar template tells people nobody can see me. I can't talk to anybody. So then it's basically the same as watching a video. Whereas the live, what this is right here, the live Zoom, it feels more real. So that's my personal suggestion. LinkedIn Live is a really cool platform. I have LinkedIn Live. Not everybody does. I've used it twice. I'm going to use it on July 1st. I'm going to have a discussion about supply chain and ransomware with Rob Hansfield, who's a very famous professor at NC State and a state CIO. And that's going to be cool. And it creates a little hype and people use it. Writing, of course, long form articles, emails, posts, newsletters. I don't tweet. I gave Christina the Civic Initiative's Twitter profile and told her, go to town, because I don't like Twitter. I know NIGP likes Twitter. I can't find value out of it. I'm sure you guys do. But if I was doing Twitter, I would do it in ways that stop the scroll, taking screenshots of other things and putting them in so you get multiple use of content. Graphics, I think infographics get people's attention. It's a value push. They're relatively straightforward to do. If you use Canva, I am going to talk about tools that I use here in a second. If you use Canva, it makes it really easy to do infographics. There's a thing called sliders, which is also done in Canva, which is basically visual or small form visual documents that are like 4 or 5 pages. It's like a small form PDF. Those are fantastic for stop the scroll. They're one of the best things for stop the scroll. If either on Facebook or on LinkedIn, if you have an audience that you want to stop and look at something, you make them scroll to the right. And every time somebody makes me scroll to the right, I've almost gotten to the point that I roll my eyes because I'm like, okay, fine, I'll scroll to the right. But if it's just up, and then you tease me and you make me have to stop on my content and scroll right to read the document, it's a winner every time. And those are really easy to do. And think mobile. Imagine your audience sitting with a phone and reading your content. I read studies at one point that said 60% of people are interacting with these things on their phone, and 70% of people are interacting without sound. So if you're depending on somebody hearing your thing and stopping, they are not going to. So you have to design it that way. Polls, Peggy's a master of like polls and high energy, right? Gamification is great. There's all kinds of ways to do that. You can make spinning wheels that ask the next question. I saw that in a conference I was at a couple of days ago where they didn't have a set of questions. They spun a wheel and it picked a question. That was really fun. Things that make people come to virtual booths is incredibly important, because I will never sponsor another event that involves an exhibit hall that doesn't have gamification, because people just do not come. They're going to take a lunch break. So if you don't make somebody fill out a bingo card, I'm not sponsoring, because it's just not worth my time, like literally not worth my time. So, and gamification, you can look it up. It's a term. It talks about kind of people like to accomplish things. So if you have ways to do that. In person, of course, we want to get back to lunch and learn and large meetings. Non-work events, I think, are like, how many of you guys do golf a hole, or, golf with your purchaser? That's outdoors. People will do that all day long, all day long. Now, I don't play golf. I play tennis. But if you had to hit balls with a tennis with a purchaser, I'd be the first in. Partial and full hybrid events, I won't claim that I am the full expert at that. I can tell you, I've seen people try to do it so that they're saying you can attend the full conference, and then full hybrid is hard to do because you can't create every little level of intimacy. But if you can make it so that, most, you're going to designate which events are going to be hosted as a component of the hybrid, so that major keynotes, major breakouts, to where you don't have to try to electrify every single room and every single conversation, I think people will still pay for that. So examples from the field. So this is some stuff that some quick examples of things I've done in the last year that may be interesting. On the lower left here, that was a panel I did for higher ed that was really well received. And so I did the panel, and then I did videos out of it, and then I did audio out of it, and then I did short form audios out of it. So I used the content multiple times to continue to be useful. The second thing is an article that I wrote about how to create new methods in procurement through agility. The third thing there on the bottom, that's where I interviewed Jim Colangelo when he was the CPO for Michigan. And that's a short form clip where we were talking about something he'd rolled out for competitive proof of concepts. That's a subtitled video that I use a tool called Subtitle to create subtitles. Subtitles stop people. So strongly suggest, if you're trying to do that kind of video, that you do that. Podcasts, I use Clubhouse to make podcasts, and then I use some tools to make it. And then this silly thing up here on the top where I had a magician do some tricks for FAPO to try to be entertaining for FAPO, because they said you can have 15 minutes and you can do whatever you want. And I said, well, then I guess we'll be fun. Tools of the trade. So this is an infographic. These are the things I use to do this work. How do I do the audio clips, the video clips? What do I use on my phone? How do I do live video, live audio, graphics, live events, email content, and the rest? So as she said, this was kind of an overview of why you would have a content strategy, how you make it valuable, what are some of the styles, and how do you do it? I'm not assuming everybody cares about how you do it. I'm sure some of you guys are like, I'm never doing this, and that's okay, right? But if you are interested in how to do it, when we get back together for the breakouts, I will go through each one of those tools, how I use it. If you guys actually want to see me open it up, I'll just open it up. I'll show you guys how I do all that stuff in real time, and I'm happy to share. And so I haven't looked at the chat at all yet. So let me look at the chat and see if there's any questions for me.
And while he does that, you've just given us a lot of content, Dustin, while you're kind of scrolling through there. I think that one of the key points that I wrote down was this notion of asking the questions, who am I writing for? Will this create curiosity? Is this something new, or will teach them something new? That really resonated with me. And the other thing that really resonated with me was this notion of I'm going to call it Dustin's 1 to 10 rule now, which is one piece of content, 10 different ways to use it. So I am like totally thinking, all right, I'm going to use the 1 to 10 rule. And I did put in chat because I heard you say, I took a screenshot here. I did this. I'm like, and wow, of course, when you're working on something, a screenshot is way cool. So excellent.
If this topic is interesting to you, if you're interested in how do you start and how do you make things and how do you do stuff, we'll spend as much time as you guys want on it when we gather back up. Hi, it's Dustin Lanier. Thanks for listening. Please find me on LinkedIn for original public sector operations content every week. And please reach out to me if I and my team of procurement professionals at Civic Initiatives can help you be a public procurement change agent.